There's nothing better than a London bus, top deck.
So at least next time it'll be a falafel wrap and a bus.
And the London bus will be definitely
journey,
part of the equation.
So what would you say the majority of your training revolves around that? I mean, obviously you do Zwift racing, which is that probably like the majority of your sessions, or
yeah, I mean
you do interval sessions?
Yeah, I do that, yeah. So I mean, generally in a week I'll do one threshold style session, like 3 times 15 minutes.
Proceed to the route.
Or an hour, kind of at threshold, that kind of thing. One kind of VO2 max session, maybe a 5 times 5 minutes.
Take the second exit onto New Kent Road.
Or 40-20s, that kind of thing, to work the anaerobic as well. But then, yeah, there'll be like a Zwift race of some kind in the week. Full gas Winter Circus kind of crit race on a Saturday, and then my preference always is for a longer Zwift climbing race, I guess, which is basically for me a time trial.
Yeah.
On a Sunday. So yeah, probably 3 races and 2 training sessions, maybe 3 races or 2 races and 3 training sessions.
I know with Zwift race, I mean, it depends what Zwift race it is, but most of the time you're spending like quite a lot of time in each zone. At least when I do a race, it's like really hard. So when I do like the community league, or I did that Fusion League a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I watched. Yeah.
That was actually quite hard, and I was attacking and doing things in the race. So it was, at the end of it, when I uploaded it, there was a lot of time spent in each zone, probably apart from zone 6, the last zone. But that's not a very, what I'd call, productive session. I mean, it's a race, so you're getting a lot of stimulus from all aspects, but it's not like it's not a specific session where you're actually targeting something. You're more just there to race.
So you're saying that you're better off targeting a particular power zone in a training session rather than kind of a smorgasbord of different kind of zone 3, 4, 5, 6, that kind of thing. Yeah,
well, it has its place. If you're doing 3 sessions a week of actual structured interval training, then it doesn't hurt to have that Zwift race where you're covering multiple zones, because it's just like your average Joe going out and doing a group ride and getting involved in doing work on the front, or we'll have a sprint for the next town, and that would generally have similar kind of layout, but possibly more time spent in zone 1 because you'll be riding in the wheels.
So in your January training video, you were talking about your reflections on how you're kind of now training, and it's kind of polarized with a lot of time in zone 2, but also when you're doing your efforts, those efforts are all at 105% of your FTP or more, i.e. they're pretty intense.
Yeah.
What's the kind of rationale behind that, and how does that fit into someone like me that's really only got, I don't know, 6 absolute top 7 hours of training time per week?
Yeah, well, the rationale, like for me, well, I can use myself as an example really, because I can use actual specific numbers, but for like if you take January's been like quite a high volume month already. But now I will be switching to doing kind of less hours but more intensity. But the interesting, I guess, part of the year that I followed what we'd call polarized training was for the National Hill Climb. And it was all very much this kind of just general club riding with friends, riding with groups, which would be fairly standard, fairly easy for me. And then the other end of the spectrum, which would be pretty much 30-30s or 40-20s, or 1 minute on, 30 seconds off, 5 times, and then resting and repeating it. But the rationale would be that you're working at such a high intensity for those things, and you're accumulating time in those really high intensities, that by the end of the session, if you did say 3 or 4 specific blocks of work at these intensities, you'd get an accumulated time of around 20 minutes. So if you imagine me training for the nationals, I was spending a lot of time at 470 watts. I was almost spending a total of like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But of course, you know,
I can only imagine spending a lot of time at 470 watts.
I'd never be able to do that in the real world. But the principle, like, it's quite simple in a way. Like, the only problem is that the training that a lot of people do, I think, is so centered around, you know, if I go slow, I'm just going to be slow, and they end up, when they train hard, yes, they train hard, but then some days they get sucked into like doing zone 3, zone 4 work, and it's like, for me, again, just
that's
like
me.
Yeah, just speaking for myself, but like when I do zone 3 is comfortable. I think a lot of people find it fairly comfortable. Zone 4, like any kind of threshold work, I actually struggle with a lot, because it's actually quite mentally and physically taxing. Like, if you're doing like 3 by 20 minutes at threshold, which used to be like the gold standard of interval sessions, it's actually like really hard on your body, and it'll take you a few days to get over it. And that's taking out, like, if you work as well, like it's even more taxing. But I think, you know, there's a lot to be said for like the going hard and actually going really hard when you mean it, and then like backing off and just riding.
And so if you're not putting then in, I guess, the zone 3, zone 4 efforts, i.e. the sweet spot training, the 3 times 15 minutes, 2 times 20 minutes, that kind of stuff, is it your experience that, you know, you've got the zone 1 and 2 stuff, you've got the really high-end stuff, that high-end stuff drags up your zone 3 and zone 4 kind of comfort zone, as it were?
Yeah. So when you look at like the power curve, which is going into Training Peaks talk, although it does break it down on Strava as well, the power curve, you could almost trace a line in effect. Say if you're aiming for a really good 10-minute power, which I was for the National Hill Climb Championships, and 2 weeks before it was like 415 watts, and then on the day of the Nationals it was 435, so it's a 20 watt jump in just over 2 weeks,
which is insane.
But it's a lot of it comes down to the fact that was dragged up by the training I was doing, and I did no like 5 by 5 minute VO2 max efforts.
So you didn't even do that kind of stuff?
I wouldn't even do that. I never touched it. I used to. That's not to say what the training I did was correct, but I definitely felt that, you know, when I was starting to get like closer to race day, and I was doing these like 90 seconds on, 30 seconds on, like a minute and a half of 470 watts, and then you rest for 30 seconds, you do it again, that's 3 minutes now at 470, and I'm like, wow, okay, if I do another minute and a half, I'm getting close to 5 minutes at 470. I know it's not all together, but all of a sudden you start to think like, I'm going really quick, like, and I'm putting out a lot of power relative to your size and everything like that. But it does make you feel strong, like when you train out those high intensity zones. But for somebody, they've talked about professional riders doing it because they've got all the time in the world, in effect, to, you know, if they do a 30-hour week, they can train, you know, 20 or 25 of those hours as zone 1, zone 2, and then they've got the time to work more specific. But
that's kind of what I was driving at. How does it, you know, how would you fit this in for like an amateur, enthusiastic nonetheless, but time constrained?
Well, a lot of people I coach, not just like through the coaching I do, but the people like in the cycling club, and that'll be like a club ride. It'll be generally their lower end zones, but then in the week they are doing like their structured intervals, their sessions that are, you know, if you're doing it right, like if you're doing your interval sessions right, like 45-minute interval session, if it's crammed full of good solid work, then you don't need actually that long to get that benefit. It will change, like for someone like yourself, like it will change the closer you get to like your goal, because you know you're doing the Marmot, you're doing Alpe d'Huez, it's longer efforts. You've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and threshold work will still come into play. The only difference is that, say if you did this polarized training from now until say a month before, and then you switch to threshold, you'll find that your threshold is probably actually higher than if you actually did threshold training.
Yeah, so, well that would be very welcome.
Yeah. You kind of like so instead of your threshold being say 250, and when you're doing threshold work you're actually working threshold or just slightly above, you're never really pushing it up, you're always kind of working at it.
That's what I guess that's kind of what I've been discovering. Like I've been stuck in a kind of anywhere from 4 to 4.5 watts a kilogram range over 40 minutes to an hour and a half for about the last 6 months.
They have found that cyclists like myself or even like World Tour professionals, if you're doing road racing, which isn't what you're doing, but you should include zone 3 and zone 4 training, because a lot of what you do is actually a lot of road racing falls at zone 3, definitely zone 3 heart rate, but zone 3 in particular, because that's what you can maintain for a 4-hour race in general. You can't maintain zone 4 for a 4-hour race, it's not possible, but zone 3 tends to be that one step below that zone 4, so that's why Egan Bernal and things like that, they go out and do the climbs at zone 3 with spiked efforts, big long climbs, 1 hour at zone 3, and it makes it a lot. I'll say it again on video, but like with Adam Yates or Simon Yates, I can't remember which one, that won a stage of one of the Grand Tours last year, and he rode 5.3, 5.4 watts per kilo for the last half an hour of this climb on a big mountain stage. He actually, for that, to put it into perspective, just over 5 watts per kilo for him is not actually that hard, because that's his zone 3. That's his zone. This is upper zone 3. It only becomes hard because it's at the end of the race.
Upper zone 3 at 5.3.
Yeah,
that's on another level, isn't it? Basically.
Yeah, but that's putting it into perspective. It's I think that's something that maybe we don't do enough of, actually. Not just in cycling, but maybe in life. Perspective is is quite important.
So summarise, really, for me, if I really want to see a difference in my threshold power, but also my racing capability, crit racing capability, Zwift racing capability, I need to lay off actually some of the Zwift races because it's too much of a plethora of different training zones. But also in my training, I need to be a little bit clever about spending less time in zone 3 and 4 in a sweet spot and the 3x15, etc., and actually more of the 40-20, 30-30, or 1 minute on, 30 seconds off, that kind of thing, but have some confidence in the method that it's going to drag up the zone 3 and zone 4 capabilities at the same time.
An awful lot you can do. You can get very creative with those short efforts. You can do 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. You can do 20-40s. You can do 40-20s. You can do 60-50s. You can do 60-60s. You can do 90-60s. There's so many. Whereas with threshold and
turn left onto Horse Ferry Road.
The threshold training, there's only so many kind of. You can mix it up to a point, but it's not as. Personally, I don't think it's as fun as well, as really pushing yourself, but not pushing yourself too much, because obviously these things are quite intense now when you start pushing those upper ranges.
Yeah, because there's the crit race for me every Saturday, probably one Zwift race, which I'll probably flip a little bit more towards the crit racing for a little bit, because I need a bit more practice at high-end power spikes, recovery, all that kind of stuff, and I guess it's a little bit more complementary when you look at the power profile in the Zwift crit circuit.
And it's good for just your overall riding ability. I know some people say oh, Zwift, it's terrible for, you need to be out there riding the bike and stuff. Well, sometimes it's not possible to. I mean, especially when you live in central London, it's very difficult to do that. But for sure, Zwift is great, or even not just Zwift, but indoor cycling is great for your fitness. But then what you're doing by supplementing it with you know, dicey crit racing at Lee Valley is perfect. You know, there's both extremes almost.
Dicey crit racing. Yeah. Really appreciate that. I mean, you know, I am definitely needing to do something a little bit different to build a power, so I will execute on it.
Yeah, it's such a diverse, like that's why there's so many kind of scientific studies and everything else done on it, because there's just so much. You could talk about it all day. It's the same with diet and nutrition, but there's no one diet fits all. Just like there's no, you know, one training session. There's no one magical training session that works and will make you win the Tour de France. It's all about the consistency of multiple training sessions that are, you know, not flat out, but are carefully managed over, you know, a month, 2 months, 3 months to get you to. It's pretty interesting. Like
but it's learning to trust in the system a little bit, because, like you say, people do, me included, you worry that, you know, you're going to lose speed by not doing enough of those 3x15s and 2x20s, etc. But, you know, your experience speaks for itself. 20-watt differential over 2 weeks at that very high already watt per kilogram kind of power output.
Yeah.
It's the kind of improvement some people would get over, I guess, a year and a half.
Yeah, well, as a disclaimer, like, you know, I paced that effort differently. So, you know, I went out to try and hold something that I thought I wouldn't be able to hold. So, you know, that was a new kind of barrier that I broke. So what's to say I couldn't have done that, you know, the 2 weeks before. But then also, you know, the training, or the performance you do on the day is the sum of the training you've done over the last month, not just what you did last week. If anything, the training you did the week before, say today, had no effect on your fitness today.
Is that right?
It's the sum of the workload you've put in, at least over the last month. So that's why I work backwards from, so say Mallorca now. I'm gonna try and peak my hardest efforts 3 or 4 weeks out, and know that I can't really squeeze any more out. This is the adaptations are going to happen now, and I'm just going to have to finesse up until the event. I can't really do anything about it. So
when you say finesse, does it mean completely lay off, or does that mean kind of just sustain that kind of level of intensity for the same kind of efforts?
Yeah, it'll be sustaining it. It won't be like trying to increase the workload or decreasing it. I mean, there's, to a certain extent, I'm deliberately trying to plateau. You know, you're trying to maintain the fitness you got, because fitness is
holding on to your gains.
Yeah. Fitness is it's never constant. It's you're either gaining fitness or losing fitness, unfortunately. And you know, it's very hard to plateau and hold it. So you just got to try your best to do what's comfortable